Hi, this is Brett from GameByte, and today I'm talking about some of the great games that have come out in 2017. But what about those that are a bit off the beaten path? What about those games that you might have missed? Those are the games that we're going to be highlighting here, the ones that might have gone under your radar when they released, and they really shouldn't have. So, without further ado, here's 8 games you might have missed in 2017. For those that were disappointed that their Dark Souls itch wasn't getting scratched, then I have to ask, why weren't you playing Nioh? Nioh wasn't exactly like Dark Souls, but enough like it that the comparisons were fairly common when people were critiquing it. But, you know, being like Dark Souls isn't really a bad thing, and the fact that Nioh brought its own pizzazz to it made it a really interesting story. You play as a samurai in ancient Japan, and you're going about trying to survive against wave after wave of enemies and various boss battles, and it's just something that's definitely worth checking out. 2017 also proved to be a very good year for horror games, and Prey was one of the few that really stood out. It was an intense science fiction story with lots of extremely strange elements that can happen, and even though some complain that could be completed a bit too quickly, that shouldn't put you off. Due to it releasing fairly early in 2017, it also means it's available for quite good prices, meaning it's a great piece to just pick up and play for not too much money. What Remains of Edith Finch was an interesting walking simulator game, as some would call it, but it was much more than your standard walking simulator. As you try to find out what had happened to each member of the Finch family, you were given almost like a mini game in itself with different elements that were more than just walking around. It's things that made the game evolve, and there were some really hard-hitting pieces in there as you found out why the Finch family is not living, unfortunately. It's a really nice tale that's not for everyone, but it's worth checking out if you're looking for something that will last a few hours and something that tries a few different things. 2017 was a great year for franchises and sequels, but it was also a great year for prequels, as Yakuza 0 kicked us off in January with an absolutely devastating, hard-punching and ridiculous third-person adventure game. For those that haven't played the Yakuza franchise before, what you do is you sort of run around, have some martial arts fights whilst trying to get through a story which is surprisingly focused on the Japanese Yakuza. In Yakuza 0 you get to see all of your fan favourites before they got to the point that you know them to be. And it's quite interesting getting to sort of see perspectives that you haven't seen before. It was definitely a good sort of way to get people interested in the franchise from the very beginning. And if you love just big old 3D brawl 'em ups, you really should be checking out Yakuza 0, especially if you love crime stories. The big issue that some might have is that it's completely subtitled, but obviously that helps add authenticity to the Japanese setting, and it's a really interesting crime story that also has a daft sense of humour, which really excels it into being something different. The Evil Within 2 is the sequel to The Evil Within, and even though it does follow on from what happened in The Evil Within, you don't need to know it all to enjoy what's there. Unlike The Evil Within, this isn't being directed by Shinji Mikami, the mastermind behind the Resident Evil games. He acts as more of a producer on this, much like he did with Resident Evil 2. The person in charge of this has really helped just tie everything that The Evil Within did all right and made it extremely fun. And on top of that, it's still a terrifying game. There's so much for you to see and be scared at that if you're a horror fan, you should definitely be considering picking it up. When it comes to Japanese RPGs, there's definitely been a few that have popped out in 2017, but one of the highlights has to be Persona 5. Persona 5 is obviously the latest in the Persona franchise, something that you might have heard about before, but have never really had the chance to play. And part of that just comes down to the unfortunate way the games have always been released. Persona 4 came out at the tail end of the PlayStation 2's existence and then had a remaster on the PlayStation Vita, but you know, by the time the PlayStation 2 version came out, people had already moved over to the PlayStation 3, and people just didn't pick up the PlayStation Vita as much as Sony were probably hoping. So Persona 5 was a way for you to jump in, but you shouldn't really be too daunted by that number thing. You shouldn't be put off by it at all, because although this has a lot of very similar ideas and feelings, this isn't a direct sequel. There's little nods and elements that you might pick up on if you play previous games. What it is a very intense Japanese RPG with great combat, great social mechanics, and just so much to do. You'll easily sink over 100 hours into the game, and it's definitely worth the money you'll put down on it. NieR Automata is flashy, it's ridiculous, and it's over the top, and that's what makes it such a great game to be jumping into. It's got so many endings for you to see, and even though it is a sequel, that isn't that big a deal if you haven't played the previous versions of the game. It's extremely fun for those who love their sort of third-person action games, and something you should really be considering if you just want something to sink a lot of time into. In the world of big hitters and all that, there's definitely been quite a few indie games that have also popped out of 2017 that definitely should have been on the radar. One of them is Night in the Woods, a really cute looking game that isn't just a cute looking game, it's much more than that. It's a lovely tale of someone who returns to their hometown after leaving it for a while and is just a bit bored of what to do. A very relatable story to have. And the fact that the team decided to tell this story through animals rather than human-like characters just makes it easier for anyone to relate to. There's lots of strange mini-games and a very interesting story, but most of all the characters are just really fun and really nice to see. What was your favourite game of 2017? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. I've been Brett from GameByte. You've been wonderful. Goodbye.